Coming in at number 10, we've got Wolverine vs. Wolverine from Marvel's Age of Ultron event. Now, as a mutant that's been cloned once, twice, or even several dozen times, Wolverine is certainly no stranger to having to cross claws with a version of himself. However, the time-traveling shenanigans involved in stopping Ultron's complete takeover of Earth has to be one of the most notable. After making the incredibly difficult decision to travel back in time and kill the creator of Ultron, Hank Pym, Wolverine found out that the new Pymless future he'd created was even worse than the one he'd left, and was immediately attacked by this apocalyptic future's version of Wolverine. Then again, considering the entire reason this version of Earth was now destroyed was partially due to a war with the Skrulls, we can maybe understand why the future Wolverine would be a bit suspicious of any newcomers. At number 9, we have our very first clone of the list with the battle between Thor and his cyborg copy, Ragnarok. During the events of Civil War, the real Thor was presumed dead after saving Asgard from destruction. As a means of reinforcing his side of the conflict, Tony Stark wound up using a strand of Thor's hair to create a half-flesh, half-machine clone of the fallen Avenger. A plan that went horribly off the rails when the cloned Thor, dubbed Ragnarok, killed the superhero Goliath and converted many heroes onto Captain America's side. When the real Thor was eventually resurrected, he wasted little time in completely dominating and destroying his copy, proving once and for all who the true God of Thunder is. Coming in at number 8, we've got another Avenger fighting a less than worthy variant with Captain America vs. Hydra Cap. After an alternate Steve Rogers that had grown up as a devout follower of Hydra wound up taking over the entire United States in a particularly controversial Marvel storyline, the world was overjoyed to see the real Steve Rogers return and finally put this imposter in his place. Literally bursting forth out of a shard of the cosmic cube, the true Steve Rogers was able to fight back against this twisted version of everything he stood for and eventually break his armor down with a little help from the worthiness deciding Mjolnir.
Number 7. Captain America and Sharon Carter. We go back now again to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who was also at the time Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer point. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. I mean, the classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus, yeah, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides at that point that he should go and try and kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then Falcon also goes after his own lead. Now, Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter that Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No shield, no nothing, I'm not working for you, I'm not punching in, I'm just doing my thing. And to think that all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend, of all people, was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking, and it's something that never should have happened. Number 6. Squirrel Girl and Doctor Doom. So Squirrel Girl has beaten some big bads in the Marvel Universe before. She's taken down MODOK, Mandarin, and at one point Thanos. It's becoming a running joke by now, but one defeat that always shocks me is when a bunch of squirrels took down Victor Von Doom. Just a bunch of squirrels. Yeah, it happened back in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes issue 8. So she bumps into Iron Man and then starts to readers are like, absolutely, you're absolutely right. The final issue had Peter get the upper hand on Osborn by mind games? Yeah, he explains how Carnage will get all the glory here in this defeat of Spider-Man and not Norman Osborn. I mean, ego is a great place to attack. If it works, it works. So when he becomes Norman Osborn again, the fight is manageable now, and Spider-Man can come out on top. Now, as great as this is, I really don't think it would be this easy to turn the tides. Not after seeing Carnage bombs. Get out of here, no way. Number 4, Batman and the Hulk. Yep, you heard me. So back in the late 70s, Marvel and DC came together for a handful of crossovers. One of these crossovers featured a battle with the Incredible Hulk and Batman. There have been many conversations about who would win in a fight between Iron Man and Batman. If you're a fan of this page, odds are you've had this talk with your friends, because they're both humans who rely on their brains and brawn to get by. Kind of even. Personally, I'd pick Batman to win that fight any day. But the Hulk, no chance. Batman vs. the Hulk, issue 27 of DC Comics Special Series. So we have Batman and the Joker trying to control the Green Giant. And when the Hulk gets his hands on Batman, well, that should have been the end for sure. Even Batman said he felt like his spine was going to snap like a pencil. And believe me, if anybody knows what that feels like, it's definitely Batman. So he gets out of his grasp by a nice double ear smack, and then he finishes him off by using some sleeping gas from his belt, followed by a nice flying kick. Now, it's great to see Batman use his skills to take down the Beast. That's what he's good at. Unfortunately, I don't think any fight between them would ever last long enough to give him the chance to do so, especially if he has him in his hands. He would be dead.
At number 3, we've got the original Clone Saga, the story of Peter Parker versus Ben Reilly. For years, the biggest question in all of Spidey comics was, who is the real Peter Parker? The hero we've been following for years, or this new character originally introduced as Ben Reilly? Also going under the name of the Scarlet Spider, these two characters would go back and forth from friends to enemies and everything in between, with Ben even taking the main Spider-Man label for a while as they struggled with questions of identity and who was behind their complicated lives. That's some clone drama at its very finest. Coming in at number 2, we have Mr. Fantastic versus the Maker. Now, most fights on this list have been between two variants of a character that have only briefly encountered one another, or eventually were able to reconcile their differences. But in the case of the Maker, this is a version of Reed Richards that is just as smart and cunning as his regular heroic self, but using that intellect for his own twisted goals again and again. Not only are these two versions of Reed Richards directly opposed to one another, but their greatest battles have involved the fate of each of their respective universes, with the Maker still dead set on finding a way to restore the Ultimate Universe to its former glory. And finally, at number 1, we have Deadpool versus Evil Deadpool, a matchup that definitely has the weirdest origin story compared to anyone else on this list. Following an encounter with a love-struck stalker superfan, Deadpool searches her house to discover that she's actually been collecting discarded body parts that he'd lost over the years in her freezer. Weirded out by this turn of events, Deadpool dumps all of the parts into a dumpster, not realizing once they thaw that all of the body parts will Frankenstein together because of his healing factor, forming a new, even more hideous Evil Deadpool. With this Deadpool wanting to accomplish evil feats that even the real Deadpool wouldn't consider, it's not long before the two super violent copies are battling it out.
Coming in at number 10, Superman vs. the Puzzler. There's no doubt that Superman has faced his fair share of hard-fought battles. You know, villains who actually make him work up a sweat at least, and ones that force him to use some of his more stronger powers. However, when the matchup is so unfair, Superman barely has to even try, and on top of that, he did use some of his lamer powers to defeat the Puzzler. The Puzzler that Superman faced here was the female version named Valerie Van Hoften. For years she had admired Superman, even wanting to become a hero just like him. However, when she was unable to realize this dream, she turned to a life of crime and was eventually hired to kill the man that she once adored. Valerie has this unique ability to break her body down into puzzle pieces, but remember though, unique doesn't always mean powerful. Sure enough, when these two squared off, Superman just straight up tore her to shreds. I mean, that is her power, but if you're going to break into a billion little pieces, you better make sure that your opponent can't punch people into space. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this point, Superman doesn't even really have to try here. He relies on his lamest power, which is super breath. I mean, come on. If you have a lamer power that Superman has, leave me a comment down below. But just like that, the Puzzler is rendered useless from this breath. A cold breath. And then perhaps what's even more humiliating is that on her second time around, she ended up in a trash can. Yeah, very unfair. Coming in at number 9, Captain Boomerang versus the Flash. This is another one of those fights where you see the villains psyching themselves up for a few pages, but you know that they have absolutely no chance. The Flash, in my opinion, gets overlooked far too often, probably because he isn't exactly a physically intimidating hero, and most of the time the heroes that can punch the hardest usually dominate the fight. But the Flash has superhuman speed, so he could technically kill his enemy before they even have a chance to introduce themselves. That's the delicate balance with the writing in a Flash comic book, and why it's a little bit different from the other ones. They have to walk this fine line between enemies that have the brain of a goldfish and a hero that seems to never remember his strongest power when a fight comes his way. But even so, this fight between Captain Boomerang and the Flash is so ridiculously one-sided. The Flash can outrun bullets, but old Boomerang here, who looks more like a lunch lady, actually thought that he could beat the Flash with a slower projectile that was designed to be returned to him. Then if that wasn't dumb enough, he straps explosives to said boomerangs. Seems like a flawless plan. Would somebody get this guy a Boomerang for Dummies handbook though, because he's gonna blow himself up. Coming in at number 8, Batman vs. Calendar Man. I'm sure that just by hearing the title of this point, you already know how this one's going to go. I'm sorry, but a guy who commits crimes related to the date is just one of the weirdest supervillains, and not very smart considering the fact that Batman is a master detective. What's worse about this villain is that he's literally wearing a costume designed to correlate with the date of the crime that he committed, making it even easier to spot him. Due to this, he has become notoriously known as a joke to both heroes and other villains even. This matchup is so unfair that Batman would probably be better off just letting the Gotham Police Department arrest him on their own. Calendar Man is a successful inventor that is capable of designing machinery required for his various schemes, but put that against billionaire Bruce Wayne and there is no question that Batman is going to come out on top every single time.
Number 7, Black Canary versus Superman. Pretty much any Injustice fight against Superman is brutal because of how powerful Superman is known for being, and of course how crazed and evil he is here. Black Canary attempts to take down the big bad Superman in Injustice, and at least she came armed with a gun and a kryptonite bullet to do so. Still, this fight ends how you'd expect it to, with Black Canary being no match for the Man of Steel. Well, almost anyways. She successfully shoots him, taking him out momentarily, but he is then chosen as a Yellow Lantern because of his immense ability to instill fear in others, which honestly I agree. Although she may be taken out by Superman's heat vision right after that with a shot straight to the gut, she does still end up getting a different kind of victory through her defeat. A consolation prize at least. She's wearing contacts that have the ability to record everything she sees, allowing people to see just how much of a brutal tyrant Superman has become, because they broadcast it everywhere. Also, I feel like if you actually put in contacts that had cameras in them, even in the future, even if like the technology was amazing, they still have to be pretty thick. Like, I have a hard enough trouble putting regular contacts in my eyes on days when I have to do that. Number 6, Hawkgirl versus Barbastos. Granted, this was Nth Metal Enhanced Hawkgirl, but still, if you had told me this was how Dark Knight's metal was going to go down, I wouldn't have believed you. In the end, Hawkgirl was the one to defeat Barbastos in the comic. Though, of course, that wouldn't be completely where that story would end, as we saw with the continuation in Dark Knight's Death Metal. However brief the fight between Hawkgirl and the Bat-God was, it was still pretty cool that she was the one who ended up taking him down. Even if it was only because of, well, the Element X blade that she was really able to do this. Barbados is basically a god, so on paper this fight in general just sounds pretty crazy. Number 5, The Punisher versus Wolverine, and Spider-Man, and Daredevil. Now you might expect you know how this one should go, but let's also remember that this is Garth Ennis writing Punisher, so yeah. It doesn't really go down the way you'd think. Instead, the Punisher manipulates the 3 heroes briefly into turning against one another when they seek to bring him in. These 3 are hoping to team up to essentially arrest Punisher and then turn him over to the courts and, you know, get him convicted with like the law and all of that stuff, even though Wolverine needs a bit of convincing when it comes to this approach at the beginning. Punisher takes out all 3 of these heroes, even managing to disable Spider-Man by convincing him that if he moves, bombs will go off. You'd think Spider-Man would actually be able to sense whether or not this was true, but I digress. I guess his spidey sense wasn't working that well that day. Number 4, Superman versus Batman. I mean, you'd think you know how this one should shake out, considering Batman is just a normal human with a bunch of money and, well, years of training. However, in Dark Knight Returns, we get to be pleasantly surprised. A normal man, even when as skilled as Bruce Wayne, you'd think would just be no match for Superman, especially as, well, he's getting on in years here, whereas Kal-El, while also being older, barely looks or seems to have aged at all. But Batman uses all of his strategic skills, knowledge, and his gadgets to help him win this fight. And man, does it go to show that you should never dismiss Batman just because he doesn't have conventional superpowers. Or superpowers at all. Batman has the best superpower, the superpower to know a ton about heroes because he does his homework.
Coming in at number 3, Star Fox versus the Incredible Hulk. During the Incredible Hulk number 300, Bruce Banner is hulking out as per usual, except in doing so, he begins to completely demolish New York City. Now the Hulk is required to be doing this, and yet despite him laying down his big green punches, most of the Marvel squad seems pretty concerned. Now if any fellow hero was deserving of a beatdown for trying to stop the Hulk, it's Star Fox. And I have a feeling the rest of the Avengers would agree because he's notoriously one of the creepiest comic book characters of all time. Star Fox decides that the way he's going to soothe the Hulk is by using his special ability to emit waves of erotic pleasure. Now I don't claim to be a genius, but I'm fairly certain you can't take down the Hulk with waves of pleasure. Even if you could, how do you expect that to end gracefully? Thankfully, the Hulk was able to knock some sense into Star Fox and hit him with one of the hardest punches he's probably ever felt in his life. It was an extremely one-sided interaction that definitely made Star Fox rethink his approach. Coming in number 2, Dazzler versus Dr. Doom. This one is just sad. Not only does Dazzler lose this fight, but she does so in her own comic book. We're not sure what the writers were thinking when they made Dazzler because her powers are definitely not what one would expect to see from a superhero. Dazzler rocks a shiny outfit with a deep neckline and can convert sound into light, plus she wears roller skates. Well, she can skate really fast. I mean, it seems more like the resume of a DJ, but okay. Somehow the writers find a way to make sense of this hero attacking Dr. Doom, and her big plan is even more sad to watch play out. You see, Dazzler's dazzling plan to kill one of the most powerful supervillains of all time was to just skate at him really fast. That's like an astronaut saying, in order to reach the moon, I will now be climbing the world's largest ladder. Dazzler tries to hit him with her light show after this, but Dr. Doom just ultimately ends up electrocuting the entire room and capturing her until the Fantastic Four can arrive to save her. Coming in at number 1, Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six. Spider-Man is a kid with superpowers that has to experience puberty and bullying all at the same time, so there's no question that he's well versed when it comes to adversity, and supervillains are constantly adding to this pressure for him to remain on his toes at all times. However, even the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man can become overwhelmed from time to time. For example, when Dr. Octopus got the Sinister Six back together, they were fresh out of prison and had a lineup that featured the Hobgoblin and a new Sandman. Safe to say that if it weren't for Doc Ock's own ego and Spidey's superpowered friends, his days could have easily been numbered by the Sinister Six.
Number 7, Deathstroke. Of course, this one, like Lobo, was a bit of a team effort. In fact, even more of a team effort than Lobo's defeat, if I'm being honest. But still, Harley fought alongside the rest of the Suicide Squad to take down Deathstroke, and it worked, so I'm counting it. They ultimately were successful, and Harley did help. So yeah. Deathstroke actually was also working with the squad but ended up betraying them. Together with Black Manta and a final shot from Deadshot, Harley took down Slade Wilson, which even with help is still pretty impressive considering how usually unstoppable and undefeatable Deathstroke is considered to be. Yeah, I feel like even if you get help in defeating Deathstroke, you're still doing pretty good. If you can do it. I couldn't do it with help. I don't know, maybe unless like Superman was helping me? Number 6, Ulysses Highwater. Ulysses was Hell's very own bounty hunter who pursued Harley after she managed to break out of her own personal circle of torment in the steamy underworld. I don't know why I called it a steamy underworld, because it's hell and it's not nice. I feel like steamy makes it sound a lot nicer than it actually is. She was back with her crew, the Quintets, and while Ulysses was a powerful demon who wielded guns and magic smoke and magic bullets, Harley found a way to outsmart him. I just love that this is more often than not Harley's tactic. In a typical psychologist play, she simply found a bounty that Highwater craved more and used it to manipulate him. He caught her, but she found a way to manipulate her tormentor, Petite, and then get back to Ulysses to offer him the bounty of his dreams so that she might escape his ire. Pretty brilliant, really. It didn't end up working out for Highwater, but in the end, it definitely worked out for Quinn. Number 5, Batman. At least this one feels like a sort of fair fight because both Batman and Harley Quinn are humans without any superpowers. But when it comes to skill sets and resources, Batman is definitely working with a lot more than Harley Quinn is. Still, somehow, there have been multiple occasions where Harley has bested Batman in both the animated universe and even in the comics, and much to the chagrin usually of the Joker, proving that while Joker may have been around for longer, Harley might somehow be an even greater criminal genius in some weird twist of fate. Of course, Batman also might try to convince you that he's only lost any fight to Harley because he wanted to, and that it was all part of his master plan. But then, what else is new? Isn't that usually Batman's go-to excuse in the face of defeat? I don't know how many comics I've read where Batman's like, oh, I meant to lose. It's all part of my master plan. Okay, Bruce. Of course, if you still feel like this is too, racy or is too dangerous, let us know and we can always try to do something different. Number 4, Adolf. I mean, this one is just super surprising because Harley would need a time machine or something to even get back in time to the leader of the German forces during World War II, yeah? Or you might just need Superman's balls. No, not those balls. These balls! Harley managed to swipe these Kryptonian power orbs while she was in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. The green ones allow you to time travel, which sends Harley back in time to, well, an alternate timeline that basically looks a lot like DC's Bombshells, in this case. In fact, it pretty much is DC's Bombshells. Harley goes back there and surprisingly not only runs into and defeats Adolf, but manages to defeat a bunch of armed soldiers besides. It's all pretty impressive, actually. She also gets to kiss herself. Her bombshell self. Her bombshell self is gross.
Alright, here we are at number 3 with Captain America versus Iron Man, or just the Civil War storyline. I'm gonna match those two into one because they're basically the same conflict. But Iron Man and Captain America have had a deep bond for quite some time, but there are some times when they have disagreements that turn into physical altercations. One of these fights takes place in the Armor Wars storyline when Tony Stark learns that his own technology has been stolen to create super soldiers. And when Captain America sees a chance to preserve the armor, Iron Man gets a bit physical since he wants the technology to stay exclusively to him. So Iron Man knocks out Cap with an electrical charge and leaves the room. But this altercation doesn't even compare to the fight they have during the Civil War event, which we all know has Iron Man and Captain America pitted against each other in their own factions. When Captain America goes in for a handshake in Civil War issue 3, he leaves an electron scrambler on Tony's hand, which immobilizes his whole suit, leaving him on the ground while the rest of the team faces off. But Tony isn't done, gets up to land a massive blow on Steve, tearing his mask and nearly severing his jawbone. It's sad to see old friends fight like this, but it definitely makes for a pretty exciting read. At number 2, we've got Batman vs. Superman. This turn of events is so impactful on the storyline we're used to that it was turned into a movie. These two had a relationship so tight they were like brothers, who sometimes fought. But most of the time these fights would be due to mind control, like in the Hush storyline when Superman is brainwashed by Poison Ivy and sent to attack Batman. But we all know the fight that really puts these two near the top of our list is the one in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. This storyline, set in the future, depicts an older, more brutal Batman who is wreaking havoc against crime in Gotham. And when the government notices Batman acting out of sorts, they send Superman after him to put a stop to it. And this fight is epic. What really makes it cool is that you'd expect a human Batman to be totally outmatched by the Kryptonian alien Superman, but the matchup is more even than you'd expect. And it ends with the two in what seems like almost a draw. But that's where I'll leave it for the few of you who don't know what happens still. Needless to say, it's a pretty insane face-off, but I think it's fair to say that the world is better off with these heroes on the same side. Okay, finally at number 1, there's Avengers vs. X-Men. This showdown has happened before this new event coming out soon, it just didn't involve the Eternals. And of course the context will most likely be different. But in the original Avengers vs. X-Men event, the disagreements start with the two factions having opposing views on how to approach dealing with Phoenix Force. On one hand, the X-Men think the Phoenix Force will bring a rebirth to mutant species, a cause they have always felt very passionate about. But the Avengers are concerned that Phoenix Force will basically wipe out all life on Earth. When 5 of the X-Men are possessed by the Force, the battle then becomes more complicated, with this third team now involved. And what's good about this is that the Phoenix 5 then become a common enemy between the remaining X-Men and the Avengers, who start trying to take them out one by one. Eventually, it's just Cyclops with the Phoenix Force in him, and he basically gets turned into full-blown Dark Phoenix, putting an end to the fighting between the Avengers and the X-Men. Because you don't really have time to fight each other when there's a Dark Phoenix with a laser vision flying around.
Number 10, Squirrel Girl versus Doctor Doom. When Squirrel Girl was new on the scene, she was still weirdly proving how OP of a character she was. Although any fight involving Squirrel Girl you would think would be super unfair in terms of her being completely outmatched. And you'd be right about these fights being unfair, but it's usually more often the other way around, with many of her opponents standing no chance against her. One of her first fights happened to go just like that, featuring the brilliant and dangerous Doctor Doom, who found himself quickly trounced by Squirrel Girl when she attacked him with squirrels, leaving him to be pretty much embarrassed about this fight forever onward. Number 9, Captain America versus the Punisher. This was a very one-sided fight, not only on paper, but also just in terms of how this all went down. Two villains, Goldbug and Plunderer, were willing to join Captain America's side of the fight in Civil War, revealing that even the supervillain community was concerned about what would happen if Iron Man won. They might be villains, but they were people too, and were terrified at the prospect of the nation becoming a police state. Punisher didn't like the idea of working with villains though, and shot down their offer by literally gunning them down. This resulted in a pissed off Cap beginning a brutal fight with Frank, who refused to fight back because, well, Captain America was one of the good guys? So based on how this fight shook out, I don't know if you'd actually be able to tell. Captain America beats the Punisher within an inch of his life over the course of a handful of panels, and also calls him a murderous piece of trash. Wow, that is pretty brutal, Cap. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. It really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8, the Punisher versus Daken. In this fight, Punisher once again is brutally defeated by his opponent, though this time a lot more permanently. Punisher ends up being no match for Daken, who makes quick work of him despite all his guns. I mean, we already knew this was how it was going to end, didn't we? Considering Daken takes after his dad, Logan, and has a pretty intense healing factor. The real impressive thing though is just how much of a beating and stabbing Frank withstands before Daken inevitably takes the victory. In the end, Daken decapitates Frank Castle, killing him, though Frank of course would later come back as the monster Frankencastle, and then later be returned to his old self once again.
At number 10, we have Cyclops versus Wolverine. In X-Men Schism number 4, a fight breaks out between these two superheroes because of a complex decision on how to face an onslaught of Sentinels unleashed by the world's powers. And as an enormous, seemingly regenerative Sentinel is approaching the two of them, Cyclops insists on allowing the young X-Men to stay and fight, while Wolverine believes it's wrong to put young ones in harm's way. So it's a battle between should we stay and fight or run and regroup. Well, Wolverine gets outranked by Cyclops, but instead of backing down, he goes to their home base and sets 2,000 pounds of explosives to go off at the press of a button to take out the Sentinel and allow for a distraction as they get away. Cyclops is angered by the subordination and decides to take it out on Wolverine as they start to battle it out. And the Sentinel is coming right towards them just to make everything worse. Maybe not the best time to pick an epic fight, guys, but it is a tough call, and both arguments make sense to me in different ways. I guess this stuff just sometimes happens. Next on our list at number 9 is The Thing versus the Hulk. This is a classic showdown that many of you may already be aware of, where Ben Grimm and Bob Banner go at it in the middle of the city streets. Side note, Stan Lee accidentally referred to the Hulk's alter ego as Bob Banner instead of Bruce for a few months before correcting it. Just some trivia for you. Anyway, the reason why they're fighting is basically that the Hulk is going crazy and smashing everything in sight, trying to reach his goal of finding the Avengers to take them down. When the Hulk easily knocks out the Human Torch and holds on to him like a prize at the county fair, the Thing watches by the sidelines wanting to get involved. Then, after Invisible Woman tries to protect the Human Torch with an invisible force screen, she too is rendered unconscious by the Hulk. So the Thing has to take things into his own hands and fight the Hulk himself. The fight goes on for pages and pages, with buildings being knocked down, buses being torn in half. At one point, the Thing drives a boat. It's crazy. Unfortunately, it ends with the crazed Hulk getting the best of Benjamin Grimm, leaving him exhausted both physically and mentally, clambering back to his feet. Alright, at number 8, we've got Superman Superman vs. Shazam. In 1996's Kingdom Come, we witness a fight between these two initiating at the end of issue 3 and carrying out into issue 4. The reason behind the fight is complicated, but to keep it simple, Shazam has been brainwashed by Lex Luthor, so it's not really him controlling his own actions. But it is a tough thing watching as an aging Superman basically gets beaten up so badly that he almost dies. In this storyline, Superman has the pure intentions of trying to corral a new generation of less than heroic superheroes to help bring peace back to Earth. And with internal resistance on that front, and also these plots by his typical enemies to imprison him, he's really just not ready to defend himself. Not to mention, he's totally caught off guard, and once again, he's older. Luckily, after some serious blows of magical electricity coming from Shazam, Superman is finally able to get through to his alter ego and speak directly to Billy Batson, saving himself, and ultimately a whole lot more from what could have been a game-changing move for Lex Luthor and the others. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of destruction done when Shazam sacrifices himself to detonate an enormous bomb early in the air above the battlefield, saving countless lives.
Coming in at number 7, Thunder Punch vs. the Transformers. Now, remember when I said that most superheroes are just people that punch really hard? Well, sometimes that isn't enough to cut it. And in the case of Thunder Punch, we feel even worse because his punches would probably be better suited for, I don't know, someone his own size. You see, Thunder Punch was one of the Neo Knights, this super team that was hell-bent on destroying the Transformers. Although, they didn't even try to design any new technology to do this. They just thought punching people really hard would be sufficient. I mean, it's worked out for other people, but not this case. Turns out when your opponent is a 4-story tall robot that can turn into a tank, punching him is just not gonna do the trick. The strangest part about Thunder Punch is the lack of logic when facing an enemy this big. The Transformers could step on him and not even notice. What's worse is the design of his costume, which completely exposes his hands. His body is coated in metal and hard fabric, but he chose to not cover up the one thing that he was hitting a robot with. Real smart. Coming in at number 6, Wolverine vs. Magneto. Now this one here is deceiving because Wolverine has held his own against some really tough supervillains, but Magneto is, well, Magneto. During the 90s event called Fatal Attractions though, the X-Men were forced to attack Magneto's new asteroid base. Once there, an intense fight takes place where Professor X and Jean are telepathically attacking Magneto while Wolverine wounds him on the physical plane. This ultimately made Magneto really angry, and what followed was perhaps one of the most horrific comic book panels in X-Men history. Because Wolverine's skeleton is made of adamantium, Magneto could manipulate this just enough to rip the metal out of his body. This left Wolverine completely incapacitated and now with large spikes of metal sticking out of his body. His only savior was the fact that Professor X was able to wipe Magneto's memory before he could finish the job. In at number 5, Daredevil vs. the Fantastic Four. Now we must give credit where credit is due. Daredevil certainly put up a valiant effort, but ultimately this was a 4-on-1 bout. The Fantastic Four are among the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, and Daredevil is a blind lawyer. Well, he can also do karate, but he has to be extra crafty when it comes to planning his attacks. In the 1968 comic book The Flames of Battle, Daredevil decided to attack the Four Freedoms Plaza, and I gotta say, he was pretty successful. I mean, he somehow fooled the Human Torch into knocking over a water tower, and then he was able to get Mr. Fantastic to attack the thing by accident. Originally, when Jack Kirby had drawn Daredevil just beating the crap out of the thing, Stan Lee had to step in and say that it made absolutely no sense, which is why we saw Lee writing in a part of the story that sees Daredevil getting Reed Richards to accidentally hit the thing with a nerve blast ray. Although the humor in how weak the Daredevil character is in comparison still resides in those thought bubbles. Right after the thing is blasted, Daredevil stands back and thinks to himself, it wasn't my kick that stopped him. Probably not the best idea to be a superhero with low self-esteem, but there it is. Coming in at number 4, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Next up, we have the master billionaire detective again against the Green Lantern Guy Gardner. Gardner is wielding one of the most powerful weapons in the universe, but in 1987, this was somehow no match for Batman's money, punches, and cool technology. During the Justice League International number 5, Guy Gardner's lips were flapping as per usual, and so his big mouth got a big punch from Batman. In theory, Gardner should be more than capable of taking out Batman, but due to his extreme arrogance, he removed his power ring right before taking a swing at the Dark Knight. The removal of his ring automatically makes this an unfair fight for Guy Gardner, and in comparison to the big villains Batman has taken down, he makes quick work of Guy in this fight.
Number 3, The Punisher vs. Sentry. During Dark Reign, Punisher refuses to stand by and let Norman Osborn become the world's new, biggest, and brightest hero, as S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded and Osborn becomes the head of its replacement organization, Hammer, and the new Dark Avengers team. Punisher aims to eliminate Norman Osborn, but Standing in his way is the Sentry, who stops the Punisher's bullet mid-air as it soars towards Osborn's head. Sentry sets his sights on Frank, and, well, I think you can imagine how this one goes. Still, at least this fight is gratifying in the sense that it isn't over with like a 1-2 punch. Instead, we actually watch as the Punisher tries everything he can to try to defeat Sentry, knowing it's pretty much all hopeless, but refusing to give up. And he does all this while being brutalized by Robert, who initially just wants to talk it out and arrest Punisher without a fuss. So that's how Punisher is actually able to survive, because Sentry just wants to talk. Punisher's skills and weapons aren't what save him actually at the end of the day. He simply manages to get lucky when Robert doesn't call out his get out of jail attempt at bluffing. Thank goodness. Number 2, Superman versus Alfred Pennyworth. You would think you already know how this fight would shake out, but hey, it didn't go down quite the way most of us would expect when it happened in Injustice. After Superman broke Batman's back with the good old Bane snap over the knee move, he had a brief moment of regret as Batman called him out for being more monster than hero, for torturing him, all while claiming it was for the greater good. As Superman considers what he's just done, he turns to Alfred, who has approached him. However, Alfred didn't approach Superman to, communicate any words of wisdom here or to help Clark come back around and regain his senses and see the error of his ways. He came to teach Superman a lesson about attacking Bruce. Alfred used a pill which temporarily granted him the same level of strength as Superman, making this super uneven fight on paper a lot more even in reality. Using the element of surprise, Alfred was then able to beat Superman to a pulp while confessing that he was very disappointed at him before scooping up Bruce and taking him to safety. Reminding everyone that even when it comes to facing powerful foes like Superman, Alfred is still and will always be a badass. In case people forgot. Number 1, Squirrel Girl versus Galactus. I freaking love this fight, and I love that I started this list with Squirrel Girl and I'm ending it with her, even though this fight is super ridiculous. You wouldn't think someone like Squirrel Girl, whose powers include communicating with and controlling squirrels and sharp teeth, would be able to take on and even defeat the epic force of Galactus, who is nigh unstoppable and comes armed with the Power Cosmic, which basically allows you to do, well, whatever writers need whoever wields it to do. Power Cosmic, by the way, turns out does help Galactus to communicate in the vacuum of space as well. In the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl issue 4, Squirrel Girl defeats Galactus by realizing that the only way to defeat him is by offering him an alternate planet to devour other than Earth. She and Tippy Toe manage to access the databases in his ship's computers and find one that is covered in nuts, which they manage to convince Galactus are delicious and nutritious, full of calories, life energy. Life energy. As strange as this all sounds, the whole issue is pretty great when it comes to writing, so as weird as it sounds that Squirrel Girl was able to beat Galactus, it actually really makes sense in this context.
Magneto versus Red Skull. Magneto and the Red Skull are on opposite sides of history. Magneto grew up in a Jewish family living in Germany during World War II, and we all know Red Skull and Hydra's stance in World War II Germany, so it's safe to say that these two villains would almost never get along, right? In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Magneto and Red Skull were actually temporarily united, but it's really important to note that Magneto was unsure whether this was the Red Skull that aided Germany in the slaughter of his people. So Magneto confronted him and Red Skull confirmed that he was indeed the original. It didn't take much for Magneto, the master of magnetism, to overpower the Skull, but unlike what you might think, Magneto does not take his life. Instead, Magneto leaves the Skull isolated in a stripped down fallout shelter 20 feet underground. He removed the ladder from the escape hatch, gave him 10 gallons of water, took out his homing transmitters, gave him no food and no light, just water, air, and his own depraved thoughts. Number 9. God King Doom versus Thanos. 2015's Secret Wars has Dr. Doom receiving the power of the Beyonders at the conclusion of Time Runs Out. The Latvian dictator is able to save reality from complete destruction at the hands of the Beyonders, stealing their power and merging all reality into a place called Battleworld, which he rules over as God Emperor. A few characters show up on Battleworld with their full memories intact, and they try to stop Doom and put things back to normal. One of them would be Thanos. Thanos, being the smug mad titan he is, decides to challenge Doom and refuses all of Doom's offers to work with him. So, in one quick movement, Doom plunges his hand into Thanos' chest, grabs a hold of his spine, and turns his body to ash, leaving one of the most amazing comic panels ever. Number 8. Joker versus Alexander Luthor Jr. The Joker has a special something that just no other villain can really stand up to. What is it? Popularity. People love the Joker. This magic word, popularity, allows the Joker to beat out other villains that in the real world he would never be able to take down. It also allows him to save the day on occasion. In 2005's Infinite Crisis, Earth 3's Alexander Luthor Jr. attempts to remake the multiverse into one perfect reality. Perfect for him at least. By the end, well, he fails, but he finds himself cornered by Lex Luthor and Joker of New Earth, which is the mainstream continuity. Joker pretty ruthlessly scars Luthor Jr. with acid and then brings his life to a sudden end with a bang. And it was all because Alexander didn't include him in his scheme in the first place.
Alright, at number 7, we've got Reed Richards versus Namor. This is a spicy face-off as it's a classic fight of jealousy and competition over a woman's affection. Susan Storm is unconscious in the hospital, and the arrogant and shameless Namor keeps making advances on her right in front of Richard. This escalates to the point where Namor actually makes a move on Susan as she's just barely coming to, and right when Reed enters the room as well. Susan tries to de-escalate the situation, but it's no use due to her injuries and fatigue, so the two heroes go after it. As they rip through the city streets, they throw insults at each other as they tear apart cafes, cars, and the road. It's a pretty fiery battle that Richard seems to know he's at risk of losing due to Namor's sheer strength, but Reed takes the win in the end, exclaiming in a heroic monologue that his anger isn't actually directed at Namor, but at himself for not being a good husband to Susan throughout the years. It's a pretty epic battle with some realistic and possibly relatable motivations, giving it a rightful spot on our list. Coming in at number 6 is Namor again versus Daredevil this time. In this instance, Namor is being arrested as if the human legal system is any match for a superhero, and to represent him, he decides to hire the blind Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. Basically, Namor is angry because he wants a place on land for his people who have only ever lived under the sea. In fact, he actually wants to sue the entire human race for denying them their birthright, as he calls it. Matt, being the pragmatic lawyer that he is, simply acknowledges that there's just no legal precedent for suing the whole human race. This obvious and very astute point throws Namor the Submariner into a rage that he takes to the streets without using the door. And in this moment is actually when Daredevil first wears the red suit that we all know, and it's in preparation for his fight with Namor, where Daredevil is off to protect humanity from an outraged underwater superhero. So this fight between two superheroes is heated by an external issue that forces them to clash. In so many words, Daredevil's sense of duty is clashing against Namor's rage. They take the fight directly to the streets, busting down lampposts, crumbling brick walls, and even taking over a wrecking ball at one point. The fight ends with Namor winning, naturally, claiming that Daredevil had been the most courageous of all his foes, at least, despite having faced off against the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. And that's a pretty good accolade for Daredevil if I've got to say anything about it. At number 5, we've got Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. This face-off has such a crazy build-up that it actually needs its own issue called, you guessed it, Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. They fight because Spider-Man finds himself caught up in an ongoing operation that Wolverine had been a part of for a long time before the events of this story. And it's, like I said, it's a long story, but basically this woman named Charlemagne is in such a predicament involving Russian assassins and basically an internal manhunt for her arrest. So she actually asks Wolverine to end it for her, to save her from going to a gulag. Spider-Man notices Logan is about to actually make her wish come true. He swoops in, and this is the last straw for Logan. This fight takes place in a graveyard of all places, leaving the two superheroes in a stalemate, each of them seriously threatening to end each other's life. But luckily the fight is broken up at the exact moment by a chopper with its spotlight on, and as this distraction has both of them gripped, someone creeps up on Spidey, who senses it and delivers a brutal punch. But unfortunately it wasn't Wolverine. Instead it was the woman he'd been trying to save, and the punch kills her. I mean, don't be too hard on yourself, Spidey, it's what she wanted, right? And even Logan acknowledges that she probably planned it that way. Okay, at number 4, it's the battle between Thor and Beta Ray Bill. This battle is pretty epic considering it's the fight that would determine whether or not Beta Ray Bill is worthy of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. He'd already shown his worth by actually being able to pick it up, but that wasn't enough, as Thor fights back against his new contender. The battle rages into a river of lava, leaving both warriors exhausted, lying on an obsidian raft. But they float steadily towards a lava fall, waterfall made of lava, you know what I mean. Beta Ray Bill shows his worth further by saving an unconscious Thor from the deadly plunge. After all is said and done, the two warriors end in a draw, approaching Odin with the results. And instead of taking away Thor's hammer and handing it over to Bill, Odin offers him a brand new weapon called Stormbreaker. So it turns out okay in the end. But this is a battle for the history books, with two of the most powerful superheroes in the whole Marvel universe facing off for the glory of respect and worthiness.
Number 3, Batman Who Laughs versus Perpetua. Remember how I said Joker would be showing up again? Well, I kinda half lied. It's actually a Jokerized Batman, which is taking two of the arguably most popular DC hero and villain combos and mashing them together. Who can stand in the way of that? Also, to call this fight one-sided is a little debatable, but the Batman Who Laughs rose from being just a man to becoming a multiversal level threat very quickly after he gained access to the powers of Dr. Manhattan. This level of power allowed him to face and defeat Perpetua, one of, if not the, most powerful god in DC Comics, who is mother of the multiverse. He became the nightmare of one of the most powerful beings in all of DC Comics, sealing her away within fragments of the Source Wall. Number 2, Thanos versus Loki. Taking a break from comic books for a moment here, let's journey to the MCU. Loki is one of those characters who has elevated himself beyond the status of villain into a bit more of an anti-hero role, and the popularity of Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of the character is likely somewhat to blame for that. But popularity is not saving this character. In the opening of Avengers Infinity War, Thanos attacks the remaining Asgardians after the events of Ragnarok. Though they are Asgardians, he does seem to lay waste to them pretty easily. With Loki feigning allegiance to the Mad Titan, he makes a move against Grimace with a dagger only to be stopped, disarmed, and choked to death without the big bad even seeming to break a sweat, truly solidifying just how much of a threat Thanos is going to be. And in at number 1 is Thrag versus Dinosaurus. The Viltrumites from the Invincible comic series are a race of near invulnerable, incredibly strong, world-conquering aliens. But none among them stands as strong, as invulnerable as Grand Regent Thrag. Battle-hardened over thousands of years, only the most powerful characters can even hope to stand one-on-one against this powerhouse. David Anders, the villain known as Dinosaurus, is not one of those characters. While Dinosaurus is very strong, it's more his intelligence that is his greatest weapon. Dinosaurus allied himself with Invincible around issue 90 of the comics, and he would see Thrag attempt to take down Mark. Dinosaurus attacks Thrag, but his claws break on Thrag's skin. Thrag pummels the Dino Man, but he stops, distracted by an explosion, giving Dinosaurus the chance to chomp on his head, only for him to completely shatter his teeth, giving Thrag the chance to mock him and then break his jaw and leave him for dead. Luckily, Dinosaurus uses the opportunity to heal and escape with Mark.
In at number 10, Shazam versus Superman. In the movie about Shazam, we had Superman making a surprise entrance at the very end, which would lead many to assume that these two are friends. Well, when it comes to the comic book world, these two have definitely fought on many occasions, mainly because the writers love using someone like Shazam who can hold his own against the Man of Steel. Shazam has a lot to work with. He's strong, fast, tough, he has lightning abilities to rely on, and a ton of stamina. However, with Superman under the yellow sun, he shows a lot more experienced combat, plus he has heat vision to rely on as well. Something that does get overlooked though is that Superman can hear and see much further. When it comes to the type of long-range battle these two would inevitably end up in, this becomes a key asset to his arsenal. If there's a yellow sun out, my bet's gonna be on Superman. In at number 9, Captain America vs. Batman. The Dark Knight is a staple of the Justice League for a reason. His detective work along with his wealth and combat skills are his greatest assets. Just like Steve Rogers, he has morals when it comes to dealing with enemies. So it would be interesting to see how a fight between these two justice-driven superheroes would play out. Although the only thing keeping Bruce Wayne in this fight is his gear and technology. Standing alone in a fistfight wouldn't end up well for the billionaire. Captain America has peak human strength, speed, and a vibranium steel alloy shield. If both of them could use weapons during this fight, it would be a pretty even matchup. At the end of the day though, this superhero fight would be more of a battle of wills than strength. In at number 8, Iron Man vs. Cyborg. This one seems like something that we should have seen a long time ago, but that's why it's on this list. A matchup between these two machines would be incredible to see. Iron Man's different suits would no doubt be able to hold their own against Cyborg. I mean, if he was wearing the Hulkbuster armor, it would be tough for Cyborg to land significant strikes. That being said, if Tony ran into an unplanned fight with Victor Stone, he might not be so lucky. Unlike Stark, Victor is infused with his tech and is enhanced by cybernetic weapons. Plus, to make matters worse for Tony, he has the ability to hack into any system, which means Cyborg could just cut off communications with Jarvis and take control of Tony's suit. At that point, he better have a white flag that he's ready to wave.
Number 7, Shazam vs. Superman. Shazam vs. Superman is a fight that everyone is always eager to know about when it comes to who ends up on top, who will win. They're so similar, but so different. Multiple times, the person who has won has actually been Superman though, despite his weakness to magic, specifically Shazam, or as he was once known, Captain Marvel's magic lightning. Despite this, Superman has before used Shazam's own lightning against him though, putting him in the way of it and thereby transforming Shazam back into his kid form of human boy Billy Batson, proving that sometimes it's not necessarily about power, but instead all you need is the right technique or course of action to turn a fight. I think that's personally why I would always feel like Superman would usually win that fight, because I feel like Superman, he's just got the know-how a little bit more than Shazam does. Experience, you know, experience. Number 6, Gambit vs. Wolverine. Although this might not be as satisfying for our editors here at Top 10 Nerd, sorry editors, this one comes to us from the Wolverine podcast series, really in essence a serial radio play, so not a lot of images, but there's lots of images of Wolverine and Gambit that exist, so hey. For this one, I am talking about Wolverine the Lost Trail. By the way, if you haven't listened to either The Long Night or Lost Trail, I highly recommend both. They are both very well cast, produced, and with a great story. And if you ever wanted to picture Richard Armitage as Logan, you can do so here, as it's his voice you're going to be hearing in this role. In the episode Greenhaven is Everywhere, the penultimate episode for this story, Logan frees himself from Jason Wyngarde's control, only to face a still mind-manipulated Gambit. While Gambit attempts to convince Logan with the words that joining Wyngarde's Greenhaven is the right thing for him to do, Logan of course refuses to hear it. He's not about the mind control right now, he's not feeling it. As a result, Gambit pulls out his cards and tensions begin to rise. The two actually circle each other, which you can hear reflected in the audio dialogue if you happen to be listening with headphones on. And in the end, when Logan decides the only way out of this is to take out Gambit, Remy goes for his bow staff. He's like, I don't even need my cards, I just need my bow staff. Not true in this case. Logan quickly cuts his staff in half. Gambit then asks Logan if he'll be cut in half next, to which Logan responds, nope, if I can't get through to you with words, pausing to punch him in the face before adding, fist to the face should do it. Which it did, so true. Number 5, the Justice League vs. Perpetua. Sometimes when it comes to one-sided fights, it's about heroes smacking down other heroes, or heroes smacking down villains. But in this case, it's about a whole team of heroes who got destroyed by a single villain. Though to be fair, this villain is also kind of like woven into the fabric of reality, as it is understood not just in the DC universe, but beyond that, into the DC multiverse, and even kind of beyond that. During the events of Death Metal, Wonder Woman faces off with Perpetua earlier on, and could have stopped her, but when Perpetua first explains the true nature of anti-crisis energy, which Wonder Woman needs to use to defeat Perpetua's crisis energy, Wonder Woman is hesitant to use the anti-crisis. During her hesitancy, Perpetua and Batman Who Laughs destroy reality, rebuilding it with crisis energy in Perpetua's image, unleashing the dark multiverse, with Batman Who Laughs later in turn betraying Perpetua. Justice League loses, this, with Batman, Wonder Woman, and Supes all being given a new horrible place in this dark world. While this loss is shocking and intense, later Diana does become willing to unleash the anti-crisis energy after understanding the cost of it and deciding that although it's a pretty scary change, it's still better than, you know, Perpetua's and Batman Who Laughs His Way. So it's a temporary loss, but still it was quite a dramatic one, and we got a lot of cool alternate versions of characters, so yay. Number 4, Dr. Doom vs. Squirrel Girl. In the same issue that Squirrel Girl handily defeated Iron Man, although he remained unimpressed with her, Squirrel Girl also takes on master villain Dr. Doom and once more proves her mettle as an unbeatable superhero. Here it was Squirrel Girl's ability to communicate with squirrels that allowed her to defeat Doom, causing him to abandon his own ship. I kid you not. I also love how Doom, I feel like, still sees this as a victory in his mind. Also, I bet Doom would say this was a Doombot. I don't know if this has been retconned to a Doombot yet, but I could see Doom saying that. Basically, Doreen Green has been an unstoppable force since day one, as Marvel Superheroes number 8 from the 1990s is actually her first appearance, if you can believe that.
In at number 3, Spider-Man vs. Nightwing. Nightwing certainly is overlooked when it comes to superheroes. He has peak human strength, he's a trained acrobat, and has learned martial arts from the Dark Knight himself. Dick Grayson also has a ton of bat tech at his side. With a reinforced Kevlar suit and his taser baton, Spidey better not get too close. At the end of the day though, Peter Parker has precognitive spider sense, which means landing a strike would be incredibly difficult for Grayson to do. Not to mention, all it would really take to subdue Nightwing would be a couple of web shooters. I mean, Grayson just doesn't have anything close to the reaction time that Spider-Man does. If he gets caught up in a web, it's pretty much over for Nightwing at that point. In at number 2, Quicksilver vs. Flash. While it would be cool to see a race between these two speedsters, we're strictly talking about fights right now. Quicksilver has greater training when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, but he's never had to deal with someone that has a reaction time like Barry Allen. At the end of the day, the Flash is faster, stronger, and can throw friggin' lightning. Although it is his Speed Force that gives him these abilities, so without the Speed Force, my money's on Quicksilver. That being said, it's more likely that the Flash would crush Quicksilver in a fight. He can move much faster than him, and if he needed to, he could slow down time enough to just smash him with a giant lightning punch, and then it's lights out for Quicksilver. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Deadpool vs. Wolverine. This is a superhero fight that deserves its own movie in our opinion. Deadpool has certainly made audiences aware of his obsession with Wolverine, and knowing Logan, he probably is pretty annoyed by this, which could set audiences up for an excellent battle that would be long and really brutal. Both of their healing factors would certainly give each other a lot of trouble, but even though Deadpool is essentially immortal, Wolverine could still best him in a fight. The difference between these two is that Wolverine is infused with adamantium. Plus, Logan just has much more experience with fighting supernatural beings than Deadpool does. If these two ever get into a fight, I'm putting my money on Wolverine, even though Deadpool is my favorite. And he should be yours too.
Number 10, Iron Man vs. Squirrel Girl. I love how even during Doreen Green's very first appearance, she earned her title of being unbeatable. The very first time we meet Squirrel Girl, she's attempting to impress Iron Man in the hopes of earning a place at his side as his sidekick. The crazy part is she successfully ambushed him too. During a test flight for his new collision avoidance radar, that's really what he calls it, Doreen jumps onto his flying suit of armor, with him inside. Unable to see except through digital readouts that appear on a visor he's wearing, he is successfully surprised and thrown off course. When Iron Man attempts to remove his visor, Doreen uses her tail to block his vision still. In the end, they both crash to the ground, and Doreen introduces herself as Squirrel Girl, explaining that she simply wanted to prove herself to him in order to earn a place as his pard, short for partner. Sadly, he turns her down, even though she did prove that she's pretty awesome, I think, in that issue. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please head on down, give this video a thumbs up, also to let us know that you want to hear about some more one-sided fights. Number 9, Trinity vs. Harley Quinn. In one of what can only be described as one of the most wild fights ever that seems to be more about clout than powers or ability, Harley Quinn managed to defeat not one, not two, but all 3 heroes that we consider as belonging to DC's Holy Trinity. We're talking about Batman, Wonder Woman, and of course, Superman. When did this go down? During Heroes in Crisis. And how did Harley do it? By playing on the weaknesses of the heroes she was up against, and also utilizing Batman's utility belt, of course, which in and of itself generally is equipped with items needed to take down Bat's colleagues, because that's just how Batman rolls. It's like, I always got kryptonite on me though, just
just in case, you never know. Number 8, Jubilee versus Wolverine. Sometimes heroes get slapped by other heroes. Slapped. Such a great onomatopoeia. In the case of Jubilee, this is what happened when Wolverine came face to face with her. Of course, this wasn't just normal Jubes, this was Jubes under the influence of the Shadow King. She was possessed by him, in fact. Initially, Wolverine baited her in by promising that he wouldn't hurt her. Wolverine says, in fact, "I ain't gonna fight you, Jube. I couldn't." But it turns out that that's a lie. Although he doesn't badly injure Jubilee, knowing she is not in control of herself at this moment, he does knock her out with a slap. A slapped, if you will. Of course, this wasn't a direct fight between the two heroes, as Wolverine was only doing this to protect others from Jubilee, and likely also to protect Jubilee from herself at this moment in time.
Number 7, Joker versus Simon. Yes, it is the Joker again, and guess what? He will appear later on as well. But I also hear you asking, Adam, who the heck is Simon? Exactly. That's my point. You think that the infamous Joker is going to fall to a guy named Simon, who most people haven't even heard of? Simon is a villain of the Teen Titans who has vast telekinesis and telepathic powers, and he is also the leader of the Fearsome Five. But in Salvation Run number 2, he is a member of the new Injustice League when a bunch of villains get exiled to an alien world. He attempts to convince his fellow supervillains that escape is impossible, and then proceeds to lay down plans for beginning a new civilization, only to be very abruptly interrupted by the Joker, who runs up and smashes Simon's brain in with a rock, repeatedly. Like I said, it was very abrupt. Number 6, General Zod versus Captain Boomerang. Never put a captain up against a general. It will not go well. In 2016's Suicide Squad, in literally the second issue, Task Force X are sent on a mission to Russia to retrieve or destroy an unknown device. Turns out that device is actually a portal to the Phantom Zone. Rather than leave it be, Captain Boomerang approaches the portal and is literally incinerated down to his ankles instantly by none other than General Zod, who was trapped inside only to break free. I doubt the Boomerang guy would have been able to help much in the squad's fight against Zod. Honestly, it's a miracle any of them actually survived at all. Number 5, Venom versus Sandman. In Peter Parker's Spider-Man Volume 1, number 16, Sandman took to reforming the Sinister Six to go after Spider-Man. Now, one of those six was Eddie Brock, aka Venom. Being the villain he once was, Venom betrayed Sandman and the two got into a fight. Things quickly take a turn for the violent and chompy as Brock/Venom takes a huge chunk out of Sandman's body, causing Sandy to destabilize and break down, unable to stop himself from dissipating into a nearby storm drain. It's a pretty awful and pretty quick dispatching. Sandman does eventually return, but not as his old self, as the years spent in a kind of ghostly form left him in kind of tatters. Damn Venom. Number 4, Kite Man versus Riddler's army. Okay, I am a sucker for an underdog. In Batman Volume 3, there was the war of jokes and riddles between the Joker and the Riddler, surprisingly, each fueled by their desire to take Batman's life. Now, each of these lunatics had gathered up a group of villains to their side, and they caused a hell of a lot of damage to Gotham and its people in their war. One person caught in the crossfire would be Charles Brown. Charles became a mole for Batman in Joker's army, and when Riddler found out, he brought Charles's son to an end. Charles became Kite Man and joined up with the Joker to get revenge. With Batman's help, Riddler takes down Joker's army one by one, leaving only Kite Man, who is forced to switch sides. In the final climactic battle though, Kite Man helps Batman and Riddler's army infiltrate the Joker's holdout, and when the battle is won and the villains turn on Batman, Kite Man had a backup plan that allowed him to almost single-handedly incapacitate 8 of the biggest bads on Batman's rogues gallery, helping Batman save the day. Never underestimate Kite Man. Hell yeah. Number 3, Batman vs. Bane. Probably one of the most famous fights in comic book history. In this fight, Batman is brutalized by Bane. Bane ends up escaping Arkham and decides to see, how much havoc he can cause. When Batman ends up overwhelmed by the hordes of recently escaped criminals swarming the streets, Bane takes this as an opportunity to strike. Run down and exhausted after a night of non-stop fighting at this point, Batman is easily defeated by the villain, who famously breaks Batman's back over his knee,
which you know we have that awesome page of, that awesome cover. Ouch. Bruce Wayne's Batman would return from this, but it would take him some time to heal. As you know, does happen if you break your back, which you can heal from. It is possible, but it's not super easy to do. Number 2, Wolverine versus Punisher. And maybe one of the most controversial of one-sided fights of all time, we see two heroes fight against one another, both who generally use less than heroic methods for getting things done. However, one of them still seems to be called a hero on the regular, that being Wolverine, while the other is often relegated to a different category, that of anti-hero, that being Punisher. It's kind of interesting. The two originally were kind of working toward the same goal here, but when they both differ on the method of like how to deal with the situation, Wolverine ends up getting pretty humiliated in the ensuing fight, with Punisher even at one point steamrolling Logan. And that's after he does a whole bunch of other awful things to him, some of which I can't even say. That's how bad they are. Number 1, Joker versus Superman. Can we even call this one a fight? It's kind of just like straight up murder, really. Although maybe rightfully executed murder? I don't know. I don't think murder's ever really right. I guess it also depends on which side of this conflict you feel you're on, though I think by the end of Injustice, pretty much all of us are on Batman's side, right? No? Yes? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But back to the fight at hand. This one obviously went down in the alternate reality of Injustice. Here, Joker and Harley Quinn end up manipulating Superman into killing Lois by making him think he's fighting Doomsday. In doing so, they not only have killed Lois, but also her and Superman's future offspring, and all of Metropolis gets blown up too as well. Unsurprisingly, Superman does not take this very well, and when they get Joker in an interrogation room, Superman ends up cracking under the pressure of Joker's unrelenting grin, killing the Joker in cold blood. Because that's what would probably also happen if the Joker came up against Superman. Well, just saying, if Superman wanted to at any time, he could just pretty much end that.
Number 10, Deadpool? Okay, so not really Deadpool, more like DC's parody version of Marvel's parody character. You know who I'm talking about, it's Red Tool. Red Tool is a mercenary who only fights with power tools, and while he doesn't appear to have regenerative powers, can definitely still take a beating. In fact, he even got beat himself up by Harley Quinn after having his phone number tattooed on her butt and arranging to surprise her for a wedding. People have always thought Harley and Deadpool would make a great match, which is where Red Tool and his sudden romantic inclination come in. Of course, for Harley, it would take more convincing than a surprise wedding. She beat Red Tool to the point that he was knocked unconscious, proving that in DC's opinion, Harley could make quick work of Marvel's Deadpool besides. At least their parody of him. However, Harley did ultimately decide to team up with Red Tool after he came to and they were surrounded by the GCPD. Fortunately, his wedding present to Harley was the perfect ticket out of this predicament. I kind of love Red Tool and Harley Quinn together too. They're pretty cute. Also just like Red Tool in general with his little tool speech bubbles. Number 9, Manos. Manos is the wielder of the Infinity Rings. So yeah, you guessed it. He's a parody of Marvel's Thanos. But just because he's a parody doesn't mean he's not powerful. He still wields those super powerful rings and is super evil, leading to Power Girl to want to take him on when both she and Harley seek him out on their adventure together. While Manos is busy monologuing about just how epically he is going to destroy them both, Harley Quinn manages to steal the rings off his fingers without him noticing, and then accidentally kills him with the rings, to boot. She didn't know they were loaded, you know, so it's not really her fault there. Should this be possible? Probably not. Is it hilarious? You betcha. How did she even steal those rings without him noticing? That's what I want to know. Number 8, Lobo. In Injustice Gods Among Us, Harley Quinn is working some stuff out after Joker is gone and ends up stealing Lobo's flying motorcycle. This ends about as well as you could imagine, with Harley being chased all over by the crazy, overly violent parody of a tough 90s guy. Lobo having the power to regenerate and Harley Quinn being a normal human would mean you'd think that she'd never be able to beat him. But you'd be wrong. Armed with Lex Luthor's super strength and durability pills and her knowledge of psychology, Harley ends up convincing Black Canary and Green Arrow to team up with her and then makes quick work of her pursuer. And then of course, using her psychology, she's like, yeah, this isn't really about me, is it, Lobo? And Lobo's like, it's not, you're right. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it and if you love Harley Quinn as much as I do.
In at number 7, Thor versus Green Lantern. Next up is the Nordic God versus the Interplanetary Defender. Hal Jordan's greatest strength in this fight will certainly come from his ring. Being able to create weapons or any constructs for that matter out of thin air will definitely come in handy and certainly has in the past. He has easily overwhelmed Superman level beings in the past with his willpower alone. However, when it comes to Thor, he may have met his match. Thor can toss planets into black holes, and with his hammer at his side, there's no telling what damage that he could serve up to the Green Lantern. If he somehow uses his hammer wisely in this fight, he could absorb any of the Green Lantern's energy attacks and just smash through any of his constructs. No question, Thor would destroy Green Lantern in a fight. In at number 6, Avengers vs. X-Men. This is a very interesting matchup and would be one of the most ultimate superhero team-up fights that we've ever seen. Each side certainly has their strengths and weaknesses, and with Disney acquiring 21st Century Fox, it may only be a matter of time before we actually get to see this play out on the big screen. The Avengers' biggest assets are Thor and Hulk by far, but the X-Men also have some extraordinary and powerful mutants as well. To make matters more confusing, you also have some X-Men that were also Avengers, so this fight could even see defectors and betrayals as well. We think Thor could handle Storm easily, the Hulk could take out Wolverine no problem, and Captain America could subdue Cyclops. I still would say though at the end of the day that the X-Men would win in this fight. They're a team made up of supernatural abilities where the Avengers has more human-based heroes that would certainly have a difficult time trying to deal with this situation. In at number 5, Captain Marvel vs. Supergirl. Carol Danvers showed us during her solo movie along with her appearances in Endgame that she is an incredibly powerful foe for anyone brave enough to take her on. However, I wouldn't count Supergirl out just yet. She's equally as talented and strong as Superman and therefore has the same abilities as he does, which would be huge in battle. It's been argued that if Captain Marvel can enter into her binary form, then she would overcome Supergirl, although if she could absorb energy from the sun, she could also power herself up as well as deplete Supergirl's powers. That being said, if Supergirl could hold off this binary form long enough, Carol would have to revert back to her normal state, which I would then give the victory to Supergirl. It's definitely a pretty even fight for the most part, but just imagine if Supergirl got a hold of a newly energy drained Danvers. She would laser blast a hole through her chest and it would be pretty much game over for Captain Marvel at that point. In at number 4, Hulk vs. Superman. This fight has actually happened in the comic books, but getting to see it on the screen would be amazing for sure. We haven't had a Superman vs. Hulk fight in a long time, and many have debated this online, with some stating that the Hulk wouldn't just get stronger the angrier that he gets in the fight, and therefore would overpower Clark Kent. When it comes to just fist fighting, sure, the Hulk may land some pretty incredible shots, but at the end of the day, we gotta give this one to Superman. In fact, out of all of their fights together, the Man of Steel comes out on top. Superman can boost himself through solar energy and strength aside, he's a pretty rational fighter. Clark Kent doesn't normally just charge into a fight, he usually can assess a situation and then take the best approach, something that the Hulk just doesn't do. Plus, if at any point the Hulk reverts back to Bruce Banner, it's game over, man.
Number 3, Wonder Woman. Sometimes you have to defeat the ones you love for their own good and protection. That's what happened in this fight featuring Harley Quinn and Wonder Woman. Well, it was less a fight and more of a rescue slash kidnapped attempt, but still, Harley came out on top here and managed to defeat Wonder Woman, in order, of course, to rescue her. So it was a nice defeat. Harley Quinn is actually a huge superhero fan herself, if you didn't know, especially of Wonder Woman and of Power Girl. In an attempt to protect Diana from those who were hunting her down, Harley disguised herself as a flower delivery person, and when Diana turned her back to go grab a pen to sign for the flowers, she knocked her out with a gas bomb. So yeah, it wasn't like a crazy epic fight, but still, it's pretty impressive that Harley was able to kinda pull one over on Wonder Woman there. Still beat her, gotta say. Number 2, Death. Not like the character death, but the actual concept itself. In the 2000 Harley Quinn solo series, we see Harley die and go to hell, but you already knew that from my point about Hell's best bounty hunter, Ulysses Highwater. To continue on from that point, Harley doesn't only defeat Highwater in the end by piecing together what he really wants and why and getting it for him, but in doing so, she also manages to escape hell and death itself. You see, Harley wants to help Highwater reconnect with his son as he's hunting down the man who stole him away. His lover, Nathan Drum. His son's lover, not his lover, who he blames for actually corrupting his son. Harley finds out, unsurprisingly, that Highwater's son and Drum are of course not in hell, but somewhere likely much better. The other place perhaps being heaven. She offers Highwater their whereabouts, but makes him promise not to punish either of them for finding love with one another. However, just as Highwater seems to agree and assures Harley that he actually loves his son very much, and so he wouldn't do that anyways, Etrigan shows up and kicks Harley out of hell. You see, she's just too much of a nuisance to remain there. After all, people aren't supposed to find things like love and forgiveness during their stay in hell. So yeah, he rhymes her the heck out of there, and then squeezes Loot Harley. He's like, you're too annoying. The Ballad of Harley Quinn. Number 1, the Trinity. Harley Quinn has not only managed to defeat all of those superheroes individually, but even managed to defeat them all together, what we refer to as the DC Holy Trinity of superheroes. In Heroes in Crisis, she manages to make quick work of them, using them against one another. She gets close enough to Diana, hugging her and confessing that she was not the one to blame for the tragedy at Sanctuary, so that she can get her hands on her lasso of truth. Haha. She then uses that to tie up Batman, threatening to break his neck with the lasso while using it to question him. She asks him if he has anything on him that, could be used against Superman. And paranoid old Batman, he definitely does. He has a bit of kryptonite in his belt, he tells her. She takes that and uses it to defeat Superman, taking off and escaping before anyone is able to do anything. Honestly, I'm actually really surprised that Wonder Woman didn't really do more here, because I feel like Diana definitely had the opportunity. But I guess, once you're holding Batman hostage, it's like, not much you can do, because they're like, we don't want Batman to die. So, fair.